When I first opened the invitation, I felt a familiar knot twist in my stomach. It was elegant cream cardstock with gold foiled lettering that spelled out MIA and Logan in a script so delicate I had to squint to read it. They'd spared no expense. The invitation was heavy in my hand. And it wasn't just the thick paper. This wasn't a card. It was a command. The expectation was clear I'd be there. But what everyone failed to understand was that attending wasn't a simple decision for me. Unlike MIA, who had blossomed into a world of stability and success, my life was patched together with freelance gigs and month-to-month rent payments in a one-bedroom apartment that always seemed to need repairs I couldn't afford. Financial instability had been my unwelcome companion for most of my adult life. A constant reminder that I wasn't quite keeping up. In a way, I envied Mia's ability to make everything look easy, a trait that endeared her to our family, especially our mother. My mom never said it outright, but I could feel it in her sideways glances and polite questions. To her, Mia's wedding was not just a celebration, it was proof of the well-paved life she'd envisioned for her daughters. And me, well, I'd taken a detour. I couldn't help but feel that Mom saw me as the one who had somehow missed the point. I leaned back on my couch, gazing at the card. The words shimmered under the soft glow of my living room lamp. It felt as if they were mocking me, daring me to ignore the weight of this invitation. The wedding was in a town that was anything but affordable, a coastal paradise full of polished storefronts and exclusive bed and breakfasts. I could already see the checklists in my mind, a dress that wouldn't stand out in the wrong way, a decent hotel so I wouldn't embarrass myself, a wedding gift that didn't scream clearance section. Each item had a price tag attached, and I could feel the numbers piling up in my head, threatening to tip my balance from barely getting by to barely getting by with debt. The internal dialogue started immediately. I could hear my mother's voice, the way she'd say, "Sarah, it's your sister's wedding, and you can't miss it. Family is family." And maybe she was right. After all, I'd been there for MIA in our childhood. We'd been close once, sharing secrets and sneaking cookies from the kitchen together. MIA was, in many ways, the version of myself I'd always wished to become: stable, confident, radiant in her achievements. And even now, despite everything, I didn't want to let her down. But the practical side of me kept nagging. I'd worked hard to stay afloat, to make it this far without calling my family for help, which had always felt like a point of pride. Could I really justify appending my finances for a single event, even if it was my sister's wedding? I set the invitation on the coffee table and stared at it, feeling a prick of irritation at how much control it seemed to have over me. I didn't want to resent MIA, or my family, or even this wedding. I wanted to feel happy for her, to look forward to the event like any sister would. But the financial reality loomed over me, casting a shadow on every ounce of potential excitement. That night, I tossed and turned, my mind running through calculations. The longer I lay there, the more anxious I became, haunted by the mental tally of costs and the thought of returning to the family home in a state of defeat. The contrast between Mia's world and mine had never felt so stark. Her life was marked by certainty, the kind you could frame and set on a mantle. Mine was something else entirely, a constant scramble to stitch together work and rent, laced with the exhausting challenge of being enough in the eyes of people who saw me as less than. I couldn't pretend that I'd shrug it off and go without a second thought. I couldn't afford to pretend. As dawn approached, I made myself a quiet promise. I'd go, but I would do it on my own terms, whatever that ended up looking like. Over the next few days, I began drafting a practical plan, a way to make this trip feasible without wrecking my finances. I opened my laptop, pulling up spreadsheets that served as my lifeline: budgeting sheets, work invoices, payment schedules. I could cut back on coffee runs, delay any new work expenses, and limit myself to the basics for groceries. If I was smart, I could make it work, though just barely. But each new cut felt like a sacrifice. I'd been saving for months, hoping to finally buy myself a proper desk and chair for my freelance work. My apartment had its flaws, sure, but I'd been building it up into a small sanctuary, making it my own in a way that felt important. Giving that up felt like admitting that I hadn't really progressed, that I was still living paycheck to paycheck, one fragile step away from my next financial setback. Family, I reminded myself, isn't about convenience, but it stung to realize that family, in my experience, hadn't been a source of support when I needed it. They'd been quick to judge, to draw comparisons. My mother's sidelong glances would flicker through my mind. Would she notice the simple dress I'd have to wear? Would she see me as less because I wasn't draped in something glamorous? I couldn't bear the thought of being scrutinized, silently judged for settling or not trying hard enough. And then there was the matter of the wedding gift. I wanted it to be personal, something that spoke to my relationship with MIA. Not just an item off a registry or a check with an amount I couldn't afford. But what could I give her that was both affordable and meaningful? My eyes wandered to a sketch I'd done years ago. A simple drawing of us as children, holding hands in a garden. It wasn't expensive, but it was ours, a memory captured in ink and pencil. That sketch could work. It might be simple, but it was genuine, and somehow, that felt like it might be enough. I closed my laptop with a sense of uneasy resolve. I had a plan. It wasn't a plan that would impress anyone, but it was what I could do. Given the circumstances, I'd put together my modest outfit, stay at a budget-friendly hotel on the outskirts of town, and bring the sketch as my gift. It wasn't grand, but it was real. In the back of my mind, though, the fear lingered. Would my family understand, or would they see me as the one who couldn't keep up? The question haunted me, but I held tight to the one thing I could control, my choice to show up in the way I could afford, without sacrificing the little bit of stability I'd fought so hard to build. I couldn't change who I was, but maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The days passed slowly as I prepared for the trip. Each decision seemed like a test of my resolve, a test of my patience, and perhaps most painfully, a test of my ability to remain true to myself in the face of family expectations. I decided to drive. A flight would have been quicker, but it was also more expensive, and the thought of air travel reminded me of all the people in my life who seemed to have it figured out, the ones who posted vacation photos from glossy airports, iced coffee in hand, smiling like the world was a buffet of endless delights. No, the road would be my path. I could leave when I wanted, bring my own snacks, and avoid the sense of failure that always seemed to creep into the quiet spaces of my mind in airport terminals. Driving, I reasoned, would also give me the time to gather my thoughts, even if I wasn't yet sure I wanted to face them. Packing for the trip was another exercise in restraint. I rummaged through my closet, pulling out dresses and tossing them back in frustration. A few years ago, I had saved up to buy a simple black dress. One of those timeless pieces every article in a women's magazine claimed you needed. It had been my one big investment, a dress that felt sophisticated, subtly elegant, and most importantly, versatile enough to carry me through weddings, funerals, and all of life's unpredictable ceremonies. So, I settled on that black dress, feeling a pang of disappointment that I couldn't afford something new or colorful. Something that would say to my family, "Look at me, I'm doing just fine," but I'd wear it with pride, and I'd make it work. This trip was about showing up, not showing off, and maybe, deep down, I wanted to see if I could believe that. The gift was another matter altogether. I knew I couldn't match the expensive gifts me as guests would bring. The registry was filled with high-end kitchen appliances, luxurious bedding, and designer dinnerware, things my family would happily buy for the new couple. Things they could afford with ease. I couldn't compete with that, but I could give something personal. My mind kept returning to the sketch, a drawing I had made in a quiet moment years ago. In it, MIA and I were children, standing hand in hand in our grandmother's garden, surrounded by sunflowers. The simplicity of that memory, the purity of our childhood bond, struck me as more valuable than any item off a registry. I framed the sketch carefully, wrapping it in soft fabric to keep it safe on the journey. It felt like an offering, a symbol of something money couldn't buy. The more I thought about it, the more it felt like the right choice. A way of saying, this is who I am. I may not have much, but I'm giving you a piece of my heart. With my car packed, I took a deep breath. I wasn't sure what awaited me on the other end of this journey, but I knew that I was going, and that had to mean something. The road stretched out before me, long and open, and I felt a strange mix of dread and anticipation. There was a certain freedom in the journey, in the quiet of the car and the passing landscapes. Each mile felt like shedding a layer, peeling back the hesitations and doubts that had settled around me over the years. As I drove, memories of my family came flooding back, unbidden but relentless. Family vacations, road trips from my childhood, my father humming along to the radio while my mother gave unsolicited life advice. Reminders of what she thought life should look like. Her expectations had always weighed on me, a constant reminder that I didn't quite fit into the mold. And yet, somewhere deep within me, I still longed for her approval. How strange it was, I thought, to crave acceptance from people who rarely saw you for who you truly were. I thought about MIA, her effortless beauty, her charm, the way she had glided through life, seemingly untouched by the struggles that weighed me down. She'd found love, success, and the family's admiration without appearing to try. And there I was, her older sister, still fumbling my way through life, still trying to carve out a space where I felt worthy. MIA and I had been close once. Growing up, we were each other's world. We'd spent hours in that garden, laughing and playing, inventing stories about fairies and hidden treasures. Those days were golden, untouched by the complexities of adulthood. Back then, we were simply sisters, best friends bound by shared secrets and dreams. Somewhere along the way, though, our paths diverged. MIA blossomed into the life our family approved of: a stable career, a handsome, successful fiancé, a life filled with certainty. I felt left behind, as if I'd somehow taken a wrong turn and ended up on a road that didn't lead to the same place. A part of me wanted to blame her, but I knew that wasn't fair. MIA had her own challenges, her own struggles, and I had no right to project my insecurities onto her. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was the family's perpetual disappointment. The one who hadn't lived up to the ideals they cherished. The road blurred as I drove, the scenery shifting from rolling hills to flat, dry plains, a vast openness that seemed to mirror my inner landscape. Each mile felt like a meditation, a chance to let go of old resentments, or at least acknowledge them without judgment. It wasn't Mia's fault that I felt out of place. It wasn't even my mother's fault that she held me to standards I couldn't meet. I was the one who'd accepted those expectations, internalized them as a measure of my own worth. As the hours passed, a quiet clarity settled over me. I didn't have to impress anyone. I didn't have to prove anything. I was going to the wedding not to fulfill an obligation but to show up for someone I loved. I could be there as myself. No more, no less. The road was long, but each mile brought me closer to a truth I had been running from. I was enough. Even if no one else could see it. By the time I reached the coastal town where the wedding would take place, I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. The streets were lined with boutiques, cafes, and hotels with immaculate facades and picture-perfect landscaping. I felt immediately out of place, an outsider in a world of polished surfaces and carefully curated charm. I checked into my modest hotel on the outskirts of town, grateful that I had at least found something within my budget. The room was small and unremarkable, but it was clean, and it would do. I set down my bag and looked around, feeling a pang of self-consciousness. My family was staying at a beautiful resort closer to the beach. A sprawling estate with rooms that probably cost more per night than I spent on groceries in a month. It was a reminder, once again, of the divide between our worlds. After a quick shower, I wandered down to the town center. I walked past art galleries, high-end restaurants, and tourists dressed in designer clothes, their laughter and easy smiles adding to the feeling that I didn't belong. I tried to shake off the unease, but it lingered, clinging to me like a second skin. I found a quiet bench near the beach and sat down, watching the waves roll in, relentless and calm. The ocean had always been a source of comfort for me, a reminder of something larger and steadier than my own life. As I sat there, I let the sound of the waves wash over me, trying to ground myself in the present, trying to let go of the insecurity that had followed me here. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the feeling that I was an intruder, that this town and this wedding and this world weren't meant for someone like me. The pressure to be enough lingered, a quiet voice in the back of my mind reminding me that I would always fall short in the eyes of my family. Still, I was here, I had come this far. I could only hope that being myself, however inadequate I felt, would be enough. The evening before the wedding, I reluctantly attended a pre-wedding gathering at a swanky bistro in the heart of town. MIA and Logan had arranged this casual get-together for family and close friends. A warm-up, I guessed, for the main event. The atmosphere buzzed with laughter and the clinking of glasses. A polished, effortless elegance that underscored how out of place I felt. As I walked in, I felt dozens of eyes flicker in my direction, and I fought the urge to disappear into the wallpaper. My black dress, while perfectly respectable, felt drab among the flowy, jewel-toned attire of the other women, their smiles and dresses radiating a confidence I struggled to muster. I found myself sinking into a familiar pattern, observing from the sidelines, feeling both hypervisible and invisible all at once. The family was scattered around the room, mingling with MIA and Logan's friends, a mix of business associates, childhood friends, and college roommates. I watched as my mother chatted easily with Logan's mother, their laughter carrying over the crowd. MIA stood by a fireplace, surrounded by her bridesmaids, each of them as glamorous as she was, as if they'd all stepped out of the pages of a fashion magazine. I could see why my family admired her so much. She was everything I was not: bright, poised, effortlessly magnetic. I tried to stay in the background, nursing a glass of water and making polite conversation with a few acquaintances. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was under a microscope. Every interaction seemed laced with an unspoken judgment, a reminder of how different my life was from theirs. I could feel it in the way they asked about my job, their polite nods of interest as I explained my freelance work, the questions about where I lived, the subtle shift in their expressions when I mentioned my small apartment. I knew they didn't mean to be condescending, but the divide felt as wide as ever. My mother eventually made her way over to me, her eyes sweeping over my dress before she leaned in for a quick hug. "I'm so glad you could make it," she said, her voice warm but laced with a subtle edge, as if my attendance had been in question. "Of course, Mom," I replied, trying to smile through the tension. "It's Mia's wedding. I wouldn't miss it." She gave a small, approving nod, and I could tell she was satisfied. As though I'd passed some invisible test. She glanced over at MIA, who was laughing with a group of friends, and I could see the pride in her eyes, the way she looked at MIA with such pure adoration. It was the kind of look I'd longed for as a child. The kind of look that said, "You're enough." The rest of the night passed in a blur of small talk and stifled emotions. I watched my family from a distance, feeling like an outsider in my own story. Each glance, each nod, each polite inquiry reminded me that I didn't quite fit, that my choices and my life didn't align with the expectations they held so close. But as the evening wound down, something inside me shifted. I realized that their approval, their acceptance, none of it would change who I was or the life I'd built. I could contort myself into 1,000 shapes to try and match their expectations. But in the end, I'd still be me, with my own path and my own version of success. With that thought, I took a deep breath and let go. Just a little. It wasn't easy, and I knew the journey ahead would still be tangled with family dynamics and old wounds. But I could feel the first stirrings of freedom, the quiet strength that came from finally accepting myself, flaws and all. The morning of the wedding was bright and clear, the kind of day that seemed custom-made for celebration. The ceremony was held at a cliffside venue overlooking the ocean, the waves crashing below in a timeless rhythm. I arrived early, finding a seat near the back, where I could watch without feeling too exposed. As the ceremony began, I watched MIA walk down the aisle, radiant in a lace gown that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. She was breathtaking, every inch the perfect bride. I could feel a mix of emotions welling up inside me: pride, admiration, a deep sense of love for the sister I'd grown up with, and, admittedly, a pang of envy. She looked so assured, so at ease, as though this life, this celebration, was her rightful place. I looked down at my hands, feeling the weight of my own insecurities. I couldn't help but wonder how different things might have been if I'd made other choices. If I'd taken the more conventional path. If I'd worked in an office, found a partner, settled down, would I have been sitting in a different seat, dressed in something more glamorous, feeling less like an outsider? As MIA and Logan exchanged vows, I let my gaze drift to the ocean, feeling a surge of bittersweet emotion. This was a day that marked not only a new beginning for MIA but a final separation between us. She had crossed into a world that felt foreign to me, a world of stability, permanence, a world where people met expectations without question. And here I was, still navigating my own path, still searching for a way to belong. But as the vows concluded and the applause echoed around me, I felt a strange calm settle over my heart. Mia's journey didn't have to define mine. I could celebrate her happiness without feeling diminished. This wedding, this life, this moment, it was hers. And that was okay. As I watched the newlyweds make their way down the aisle, hand in hand, I let go of the last bit of envy that had clung to me. I could feel something else growing in its place, a quiet acceptance. A gentle peace. I didn't need to match my family's expectations or Mia's life to feel complete. I had my own path, my own version of happiness, even if it didn't come wrapped in the same package. After the ceremony, I found myself walking along the cliffside, the breeze carrying the scent of salt and wildflowers. The ocean stretched out before me, endless and open, a reminder of the vastness of life beyond the narrow expectations I'd carried for so long. I sat on a small bench overlooking the water, letting the silence wrap around me. For the first time in a long time, I felt at ease, untethered from the weight of comparison and judgment. I realized that I had been holding myself back, clinging to an idea of family approval that no longer served me. My life didn't need validation from anyone else. It was mine to shape, to cherish, to live. Sitting there, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would embrace the choices I had made, even the messy ones, the ones that hadn't turned out the way I'd planned. I would build my life not on the standards of others but on my own sense of purpose. My own passions, my own heart. The waves crashed below, steady and constant, and I felt their rhythm echo in my chest. I was free to be me, to forge my own path, without the shadows of comparison or the weight of my family's expectations. I stood up, feeling lighter, my heart open to the possibilities ahead. The drive back felt different, lighter somehow. as if the miles between me and the wedding were also creating distance from the insecurities I'd carried with me. The road stretched out before me, open and welcoming, a blank canvas waiting to be filled. As I drove, I let my mind drift to the future, thinking of the life I wanted to create. I didn't need to live up to anyone's expectations but my own. I could follow my passions, take risks, and embrace the uncertainty that had once felt so daunting. My worth wasn't tied to my family's approval, nor to the life my sister had chosen. It was something I could define for myself. For the first time, I felt genuinely free, unburdened by the need to prove myself or fit into a mold that had never felt quite right. The road ahead was mine, and I was ready to follow it, wherever it might lead. When I returned home, my small apartment felt like a haven. I looked around at the familiar, modest space and felt a deep sense of contentment. This was my life, imperfect, unfinished, but wholly mine. I didn't need a grand gesture or an extravagant lifestyle to feel fulfilled. I had my work, my passions, my independence, and now, a newfound sense of self-acceptance. I unpacked, setting the framed sketch of MIA and me on my shelf. A reminder of the love we shared, even if our paths had diverged. I knew that family would always be a part of me, but it no longer defined me. I could love them, cherish them, and still be my own person. As I settled in that evening, the city lights twinkling outside my window, I felt a quiet joy fill my heart. I had found my way, not to the life my family had envisioned but to the life I was meant to live. And for the first time, I felt enough.